Whoa, what's going on here? Peace and love, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to CTN Media, where we are changing the narrative and we're doing it with you. Do me a favor, share this out right now on your network. Let's make sure we're creating engagement. This is conversation for the culture, by the culture. You want to make sure you're tapped in. If you're not following us on YouTube, I don't know what you're waiting for. Go over to YouTube and follow us at CTN Media, and we would love to connect with you. Don't forget to ring the bell so you can be notified when new content is coming your way. And once you do that, make sure you go ahead and super chat us up. Super chat us. Let's keep supporting independent Black media as we take our way and make our stance as the main media. We are mainstream, but we got to make sure we keep being supported by our community. So again, share this out on your network. It's time for your favorite Takeover Tuesday. Yes, I have Takeover Tuesday coming for you in just a moment. Now, this episode has been powered by the Black Business Initiative's Black Boss Summit. The Black Boss Summit is coming up, and we want you to go ahead and get your tickets now. The Black Boss Summit coming up September 10th through the 12th. We want to talk about how we are adapting, performing, and thriving because we are a resilient people. Space is limited in person, so grab your ticket now. It's a weekend full of A-list events, A-list speakers, a great networking experience, speed coaching, and more. So go ahead and grab your seats at the Black Boss Summit. Go to www.blackbosssummit.com. All right, that's empowered by the Black Business Initiative. Welcome again to 7 Generations Black. We are in season 6, episode 7, and today we're going to be talking about the case for reparations. Welcome to 7 Generations Black, a podcast powered to equip and inform you, clear your lens, and present you with a new perspective. With my phenomenal team, I think you got a sneak peek, but let me bring it to the stage. The one and only Theo Wilson. What's up, Theo? H-Soul. Peace, brother. Our guy, LETHOL. And, of course, holding down for the ladies, Jice Johnson. I'm your host, Shay, and we are 7 Generations Black. It's good to have you with us on this Takeover Tuesday. Now, today we're talking about a topic I think we've kind of crept into a little bit, but it's time to start unpacking this thing. The case of reparations. Who else owes us? So you know it's about to get unbossed and unboxed. So, yep, drop this in someone's DM right now. Within the first 100 days of the Biden-Harris administration, we have seen no specific legislation or funding for the Black community. While legislation has passed concerning the LGBTQIA and Asian communities, what have they done for the Black community? What has happened? Why does the country have a serious problem with addressing the cost of repairing the Black community and Black people? Besides local, state, and federal government, we're looking for some. What is that? What is that feedback? Let's get that feedback out.
Get on mute. Get on mute.
Boom, boom, boom. Feedback a little bit. Besides local, state, and federal government, there are entire industries that also need to make amends with the Black people. It's not just them. So today we're going to dip into this conversation and hopefully give you a 7-generational mind switch of who else owes Black people, and it's time to collect. Now, this is your last chance. After this, there's no turning back. This is your opportunity to stop listening and tune out now. Well, if you do, the story ends, and you can wake up in your bed and believe whatever it is you want to believe. However, if you take the 7 generations red pill, you stay here with us in a liberatory discussion, and we show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. As always, the choice is yours. Welcome again to my favorite show, 7 Generations Black, with this phenomenal panel, this squad. Share this out with somebody right now. This is the last episode of this season. So you might want to get involved with this conversation. This is the time to let your voices be heard. We want to hear from you. Let's talk about it, y'all. Welcome. You guys doing all right? Hey, guys. Hey. Who the hell else owes us? I know some of y'all owe me, but who owes us? Let's dig into this thing. Let's unpack it. Man, when I started thinking about reparations, it's crazy because I think the conversation a lot was just about federal government, a little bit of local, a little bit of state. But now when we start really unpacking these things, I never really start looking at the bigger picture when we start thinking about real industries like your agriculture industry and your media industry and all these other industries that actually might owe us just as much. So I want to just tip this thing off. I'm going to start off with my guy, LETHOL. LETHOL, the case for reparation, who the hell owes us, and what does reparations look like for Black people?
Wow. So I think the conversation that surrounds reparations is rather, from what I've seen, limited in scope when you talk about from the perspective of who owes what, right? So we always talk about it in the context of it's the U.S. government and maybe a couple of states in the South and some local governments that owe us, right? But Brother Minister Malcolm X, when he was working with the Organization African Unity and he was establishing the Organization of African American Unity to link those up, right? He talked about the need for us as Black people to think broader in terms of the world, right? And to draw the connection from what's happening in the world to the country, to the state we're in, to the city we're in, to the block we're on, to the house we live in or apartment building, whatever the case may be. And then he talked about going back up that ladder. You understand what I'm saying? And so I think the conversation is limited, and I think that we have to broaden it and look at and have conversations about what is it that Christianity owes us, because there were two papal bulls passed, one in 1452 and one in 1455, that led to the establishment of the doctrine of discovery in 1493, which begot manifest destiny concept in 1845. You understand what I'm saying? And I think we have to do this historical work so that we can really talk about accountability. You understand what I'm saying? And it doesn't even, I mentioned Christianity, but we also have to take a look at Islam as well. And I apologize to some of my Black brothers and sisters out there who subscribe to Islam, right? But I'm not talking about Islam as a way of life. I'm not talking about Islam as a set of religious doctrine. I'm talking about Islam as the empire. And if we don't know that Islam was once an empire that came from the West, enslaving our brothers and sisters in Kenya, Sudan, Djibouti, and things of that nature, then we're wrong. And we're limiting ourselves to the transatlantic slave trade, which really only focuses on a small corridor of countries in Africa, right? I'll call it the forehead portion, right? If you look at a map of Africa, like that little forehead that sticks out, and you drop down to Senegal and you work your way east, well, first work your way south to Liberia and come around under the forehead to Cote d'Ivoire and those countries, right? And then you go east into the country up to Chad. That's where the bulk majority of DNA from us, those who consider ourselves to be foundational Black Americans, are going to come from, right? But it wasn't until 2007 where in the country of Mauritania, which is north of Senegal, right? In the summer of 2007, I believe it was June 2007, that was when that country finally outlawed slavery, 2007. Everybody on this thread and everybody on this panel, we were alive. Some of us were teenagers at that point in time. Some of us were adults. You dig what I'm saying? And so all I'm getting at, the point that I'm making, and I'm kind of being long-winded about it, is that I think we have to broaden the perspective, and we also cannot exclude those African countries who I've just named, where some of our DNA comes from, especially if those who are in rulership claiming sovereignty in those countries have some sort of DNA link to those individuals during the day of early slavery, early colonization, negotiated with the European, the Mzungus, to enslave some of our ancestors. We just have to think broader. And the reason why I bring that up is because I've said it before, whereby there's a reason why the Asians have the type of political power that they have, because they have sovereign countries claiming them. You understand what I'm saying? And unfortunately, our sovereign country or sovereignty is claimed by the United States of America.
Yeah. I know it's usually very plain to see, but slavery enriched white slave owners, right? And so we're really looking at what that looks like. In 1860, I think it's over $3 billion were the value assigned to the physical bodies of enslaved Black people. So we're talking about $3 billion right there. And then we start to look at this. When we talk about who owes us in that sense, and we start to really unpack what wealth looks like and how we've been held back from wealth, is it our responsibility to take back what has been stolen from us? Whose responsibility is to get this thing rolling and moving? Don't everybody.
I was like, is that for anybody?
Yeah.
You usually go to someone.
Right.
I think to Lethal, Lethal's talking about going broader, and I think we have to start first by going narrow, because the first thing is that nobody feels like they owe us, right? And even if they know that they owe us, nobody feels like they owe us. I mean, we have to fight people back for our art. We have to fight people back for, we have no land. I mean, it just, the layers to which people feel entitled to our things, right, are being very broad in nature. But the level of entitlement that in particular white people feel to Black intelligence, innovation, artistic license, and so on and so forth, is super broad. But that being said, I think we have to go a little bit more narrow in before we start expanding out, right? And so when I think about the case for reparations, and I think about where we are with the Biden-Harris administration and how easy it has been for other communities to come in really off the backs of what we've done, I start thinking about how to spread that out and think past the federal government. So I think the federal government is kind of the obvious answer of who owes reparations, right? But when we start talking about systematic things, we're now digging deeper into who else has excluded us outside of federal policy. And I think that's kind of where, my mindset goes. First of all, I automatically think about the banking industry. That's huge. The banking industry affects the housing industry. It's not like realtors and whatever. The banking industry is responsible for redlining, right? Then when we think about things like other big industries like agriculture, right? And when we think about where, now this is another place of federal government, but on two separate sides. The federal government is one, but when we start thinking about things like construction, right? How a significant amount of construction contracts come from federal, state, and local government, right? And then we're excluded outside of those types of contracts. I talked about this before, where if you go and take the top 10 largest construction companies across the entire country, almost all of them started right in the Reconstruction era. Kiewit and some of these other large companies, they're 6 and 7 generations in, right? So they didn't just become billion-dollar construction companies that have construction projects in all 50 states. They did that because they were working with the government, and the government paid them to build these things and excluded us out of those industries. So I think we have to start looking at industries that had denied us access or that have cut us out of the loop in addition to the government. And more importantly, where we're looking at the government, there's the overall government, the fact that the government allowed for laws that enslaved us. And then there's where the government has funded industries in innovation, in technology, in media, in construction, and has cut us out of those spaces, so much to the fact that it has not allowed for our businesses to take flight.
Oh, Jice, you bring up so many great points, and I think that's a great way for us to start really looking at it. Those of you just now tuned in, please share your comments, share this out with someone else. I think we really need to have conversations around this as a whole, as a community, because I think this conversation gets lost so many times around reparations. A lot of people say it's so far-fetched that why are we even having the conversation? And then there's that whole, bootstrapping. Well, why don't you bootstrap yourself on and keep it moving? So when we start being real about the racial wealth divides and how it wasn't for a lack of labor, it's really it's a lack of financial capital. When we really start getting into that conversation and going past the you can do it, or one individual behavior is going to change this, and if everybody personally took accountability and responsibility for their personal portfolios and management, then all of a sudden this would change. Theo, can you tell us how that rhetoric doesn't really support reparations and what we're really looking for and what we're really calling for?
Well, it's so funny. The same culture that calls us lazy also went all the way to Africa to get out of the work of building its own damn empire. I just can't get over the irony of that, right? When you talk about who owes what, Jice hit the nail on the head. It's the banking industry. So if you never read the book, The Half Has Never Been Told, it's got all the receipts, namely from notaries in Louisiana who have the best preserved records from the 1800s about who has what and who grew their capital from slavery, right? And I mean, it's incredible. You hear about slavery, and I was talking to some conservatives about this. You hear about slavery, but you really don't understand how banks leveraged Africans as credit. And you really don't understand how expensive Africans were, Black folks were, our ancestors were. You see, you mentioned that at the eve of the Civil War, we were worth $3 billion. We were collectively the most valuable asset in the entire United States. We were more valuable collectively than gold, silver, coal, manufacturing, you name it. Because people don't really realize how expensive a slave was back in them days. See, an $800 slave, you got to adjust for inflation. That's 1800s money, right?
Right.
An acre of land back then will cost you about $325. Inflate that up, that's about $112, right? A Black person back then was $800. If you adjust that from inflation, that's $27,609. And sometimes a slave master could buy 10 slaves, right, in one auction. Nobody up north was really slinging around that kind of money. The antebellum South was Silicon Valley. Cotton was fucking Bitcoin. Make no mistake about this. It was the most widely traded commodity the entire planet, right? And the South was Saudi Arabia, right? When you talk about the Industrial Revolution, we funded that because before there was the locomotive, before there was steam engines, before there was automobile, there was the textile mill. The textile mill and all the systems of accounting, labor, check, paying folks, all of that shit, right? Came from the fact that what was being made in the textile mills, things made of cotton. And so then you have the fact that the credit leveraging in the South was leveraging banks in Britain even after they abolished their own slave trade. The CAPL Bank was started by slave owners. So then those banks get absorbed into more modern banks. So these assets get absorbed into Wachovia, which gets absorbed into, I believe, US Bank, which gets absorbed into, Wells Fargo, Chase Manhattan. So all of these things, Goldman Sachs, all of these things, if you trace their assets, come from the robber barons of slavery. They called themselves land pirates, right?
Yeah.
And so the banking and credit industry specifically, which funds all other things, is, I believe, where the target is.
So I'm gonna need you to step in here. I would love to address some of the comments coming in. We want you to keep talking to us. It's a conversation for the culture. TJ says, I agree, bootstrapping isn't going to work, but what is? If everyone owes us, but who's really gonna pay? So how do we even be able to engage people? Because I think that's the conversation I hear a lot of the times. People understand that reparations is owed. They understand the history, but they don't understand where it's going to come from or how it's going to even happen. No, if you're on mute, they're still not going to understand.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's what makes this conversation extremely dangerous in my mind, because I think that we're dancing on a slippery slope, and I'm concerned about the mindset that it puts Black America in to walk around talking about who owes us, right? Mm-hmm. Just as a mindset, not whether I love what Lethal's doing with it. I love what Jice is doing with it. I love what Theo's doing with it as far as historical accuracy. That should be taught. We should understand the history behind it. We should also understand the role that we played as African people in creating that situation as well, right? So that we don't, as the Jews say, never again. But I'm seriously concerned. What does it do to the African mindset to walk around thinking that everybody owes us? I know it does something very interesting when I'm hanging out with a clique of people or hanging out with an individual who thinks that everybody owes him. And it sets up this mindset that these people don't necessarily go out and do for themselves. Again, I understand the historical accuracy, and it should be talked about and it should be told. I do not think that it should be a focus of African, of our mindset. I don't, if you want to appoint and this is the reason, let me secondary the reason why. We're not going to get shit from America. Let's just be very, very clear about it. And if you're not going to get shit from America, how much energy should we really put on a limited bandwidth of energy to fighting an institution, America, that was founded upon this particular principle? Listen, if America had the money, and I think they do, they're never going to give it, because once you give that money to Black people, there is no more America as you know it. Because it was the foundational organization. It helps organize society to have, that's why Black people are disempowered now. So it's never going to happen. So you can get all the committees and you can get all the, the Juneteenth, clubs and, red, black, and green flags and fly them and all this. That ain't gonna get you shit. And you can make the most eloquent argument. Go have Cornel West or somebody else make the argument for it. It's not going to mean a mother-sucking thing, because America ain't paying a mother-sucking thing. So do we really want to focus our energy in creating a movement that is not going to bear any fruit? Or do we want to educate our people around what has happened historically to us, as Lethal is very rightly pointing out, as Theo is very rightly pointing out, as Jice is very rightly pointing out? Or do we want to set ourselves in this mindset that, okay, white folks owe us, Chinese people owe us, some Negroes owe us too, by the way, because in some African kings and queens, they owe us some shit. Like, is that the way we want to show up in the world?
Can I answer that?
I think that's a great question, and I want you guys to all jump on that, because I think there's something great. And I think as you're doing this, there were so many missed policy opportunities to atone for slavery with reparations. So there's so many things in that space. So I think you're really heading down a solid direction. Go ahead, Theo or Jice. I would love for you to respond to what our brother has said.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I think about that all the time, right? I say I know enough to be a realist, but not enough to be a pessimist. See what I'm saying? Things have happened in remarkable speed once critical mass was reached. What's more dangerous to me is walking around with people who act like they don't owe you nothing. That's dangerous too. Because what happens is, therefore, a true friendship can't be made. Nobody wanted to walk away from the debt more than Black people. Do you realize that? Black people, because of our trauma, wanted to just shut this shit up. Whenever people be like, Black people, you keep holding on to race. Oh, no. You must not know my daddy's generation. Because much of the civil rights generation literally wanted to move into the suburbs of the American dream and drink some wine and forget all about it, right? And so what happens is the debt becomes a problem when the debt keeps getting deeper, right? So it's not like the carving of African flesh was done. It's still a process that's underway. And we see study after study. You can name the Justice Department's purging of the Ferguson PD and finding all the institutional racism there, finding it was just only mid-level in terms of institutional racism in police departments. So this stuff is still going on, to Black people's homes being devalued by $100,000 or more if someone sees that there are black pictures literally on the mantle, right?
Literally.
And so there's a great book by Sean Rochester called The Black Tax. And what's interesting about the black tax is that it is a tax that's imposed on you just for being black. The problem is you don't get shit out of it. When you get taxed for roads and bridges and shit, at least you get roads and bridges, right? So we're in a situation where we're asked to move forward as time only marches forward, right? But the system of extraction is still extracting, making the debt deeper by the day. And so one of the ways to stop the extracting is to make an account of the debt already. You see what I'm saying? Because as it keeps going forward, then we have a problem with the fact that, like, this is going to make us literally broke by the year now. They moved it up. It used to be 2050, but now it's like 2042 after the pandemic. You see what I'm saying? I got a daughter. By the time she's my age, Black America will have a negative net worth unless something intervenes.
Well, who would you be appealing? And I hear you, Theo, but who would you be appealing that argument?
I feel like part of the issue is that when we're looking at the full scale of history, right? White folks have not controlled the whole fucking planet until the last couple of centuries, right? Prior to that, for thousands of years, we have ruled and we have reigned over all parts of the world. And so how quickly something changes and how quickly something turns, I don't think that it ain't never going to happen, right? I think something has to happen to reset the balance because there's a difference between living in harmony with the world as a whole and then the way white folks work, which is just destructive and extractive. And so what I see in that, because to your point, I understand about the mindset of walking around like somebody owes me, right? But not enough of us have the mindset that somebody fucking owes us. That's part of the problem. Because if we were all of the mindset that somebody owes us, then we would have the mass and the power and the leverage to go and make demands, which we do not have right now. And so we need to get more people of the mindset that somebody owes us. Matter of fact, you owe us and you owe us and you owe us and you owe us. And we have the history to go back and prove why. Because to Theo's point, we are losing ground every single generation. We are not gaining ground at all anywhere in America. And so
let me ask you a question, Jice, before you move forward in that space, because we did start it off talking about the Biden and Harris administration. In that space, is there any room for us to have this conversation about reparations with the Biden and Harris administration that's in right now? Is there any space for that?
I think that we can literally not let off their helmet about it, even if this administration doesn't do it. Because what I think we're seeing, and I just had this conversation today with Dr. Ken Harris out of Detroit, looking at Democratic leadership and looking at things like this, looking at Denver, right? Denver, in 2 more years, Denver will have been under Black leadership for 24 years and has gotten nothing but whiter. We look at the Democratic Party. It is literally the epitome of Black leadership, and Democratic parties hurt Black people over and over and over again, but it feels nicer. And so we keep going with it. And it's literally putting us into a place where we will have nothing. And I think what we're not really talking about when we talk about reparations, if the only thing that comes to mind is that you need dollars and money, then we're not looking at reparations the right way, because reparations goes into everything from higher education, which we've been denied. It goes into, home ownership. It goes into industries and opportunities, right? And so when you're listening to people talk about DEI, and then now you have people who want to get more specific, like OEI, which is opportunities, equity, and inclusion, right? What they're talking about is the fact that we have been denied opportunity in order for us to come up and make a way. And what I think is that we don't have a really clear picture about how fucked up the numbers really are. So before I digress and move and let Lethal jump in, I'll give you one example. Bank of America came out and said, we're going to donate $1 billion. And people were, $1 billion, right? It was amazing. People were talking about moving their accounts over to Bank of America, all of this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And what I said is, I don't think that people understand how small $1 billion is on the global market, how small $1 billion is in the American market. Bank of America alone has $2.3 trillion under assets. So the first thing is, we're talking about if you got $100 in your pocket, Bank of America dropped 50 cents and we went ape shit over it. That's what just happened. They dropped 50 cents and we was like, Thank you, Bank of America, for your 50 motherfucking cents. That's what we said, right? So now, when we put this into the context, that Bank of America is one of 3 major banks. So when we're talking about how much money is under assets in this space, that's one thing. And then we don't listen before we get super excited. So almost 800 million of their $1 billion is dedicated to them actually deciding they're going to loan money to Black people. That's what they're going to do. Their $1 billion pledge, 800 million of it is we're going to loan you money. So now you can possibly get a loan for your business, possibly get a loan for your housing, possibly get a personal loan. So maybe you can consolidate some debt somewhere. That's where their $1 billion is going, is to loans to the Black community, because they've denied us access to capital for all this time. And now they want to give it back to us like they've done us some favor when they make over $1 billion a year in just collecting overdraft fees from Black people. So what
I
are
hear
we
you, so I'm thinking about how to answer your question, so because it is a strong question. Let's go to Lethal.
Yes. And Lethal, as you go in, I would love for you to look at that chat a little bit, because we have a lot of conversation around this. So if you can tie that into whatever you're going to say. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to do. I think, and it was a brother named Gary, won't say his last name. If he's listening, if somebody get this to him, he'll know who we are. Brother named Gary from Shop Talk Live here in DC. And he said that part of our problem in our community is that we fail to come to an agreement on some left and right boundaries with regards to anything that we're dealing with, whether it be a conversation, whether it be an issue. And when you have a lack of an agreement around what something is, that's when you have people talking past each other. You understand what I'm saying? So what I want to do is kind of set the stage here, because I think it's important to understand, and I'm going off of something that I believe it was, there's a conversation going on between Matt Capper, Anthony Osborne, and someone identifying themselves as TJ in the discussion page, right? Or in the discussion thread. Reparations is a word that has been around since the 14th century. Let's establish that. It's not a new concept. And reparations is the act of mending or making whole. All right. Reparations in 1921 became about the aggressor in a war paying for what they may have done to whomever they defeated. So we as a Black people must understand that when we say we don't think that we should or we are against reparations, we are actually saying, based off the etymology of the word, we are against being made whole. And it's very dangerous to say. And to Soul's point, he's absolutely right. We shouldn't just have Black people free willy-nilly walking around out here. Oh, you owe me. You understand what I'm saying? We don't want that, because there's a lot of brothers and sisters who do not take the time to do the knowledge and to understand what it is this issue actually encompasses. You understand what I'm saying? And he's also absolutely correct in that we cannot depend on this country to first and foremost admit, acknowledge, and then atone. We can't. Their history doesn't indicate that. But their history also indicates that if we take this idea to the world stage, that they will kill us to prevent us from doing that, i.e., Brother Minister Malcolm X. Because that's what he was doing. He was working on forming an alliance with very powerful at the time international organizations, countries back on the continent our ancestors came from. You understand what I'm saying? And when I talk about Black people taking ownership of the issue of reparations, and I mentioned the religions of Christianity and the religions of Islam. And when you understand the roles that the religion of Christianity and the religion of Islam played in enslaving your ancestors, enslaving today your mindset, your mind, which then enslaves your spirit, which the etymon of that is to breathe. They're telling you that basically you need a religion, a set of rules to help you breathe. You don't need that. Naturally, you know how to breathe. You see what I'm saying? And so we have to understand that words have meanings, and the meanings of words are super important. And we have to understand what that means. And listen, if someone comes in here in my home and messes with me, you damn right they owe me. You damn right they need to make me whole again if they break down and burn down my house. And so we are owed, and we do have a right to be made whole. It's just how we need to go about bringing that about.
So here's the
fight for everybody.
Here's the challenge and the pushback.
Before you do the challenge, before you do the challenge,
hold on.
let me like, there was one part that I forgot, because to your point over there, I think what I'm looking at is, and this is kind of the question that happens between, like, let's say Dr. Boyce Watkins and Antonio Moore, right? Antonio Moore is saying strongly we have to have reparations, and Boyce Watkins is saying we could build our own and we could do it on our own, right? And I think that one of the things that is not viewed upon, and that's why I was given the example of the Bank of America and the $1 billion, is because we don't have all the time the concepts of the sizes of what we're talking about and how large. Hold on. Okay, hold on, please. We don't have a concept of how large the gaps really are. And without having those reparations and on the downward trajectory that we are on, or without at minimum having the harm stopped, it would be different if it was hands off and Black folks were actually allowed to just go ahead and start thriving, right? But to Theo's point, they're still actually carving away at us. So it's not even like we get to just start growing and thriving from here, and now we can, build and we can, start closing those gaps on our own. When they create blanket policies that doesn't close gaps, so when you do a blanket student loan policy and you clear white debt and Black debt, that doesn't close gaps. White folks don't need help closing those gaps. Black folks do need help. White folks don't need help paying debts. Black folks need help paying debts. Even when we're looking at the shift that's getting ready to happen, we're looking at a shift that's getting ready to happen from the boomer era down to the millennials. Millennials are struggling today, but when the boomer era transfers their wealth to the millennials can pay off their student loans with no problem. White millennials can. Black millennials still won't be able to. So I think what we're not seeing is that we have no way to stop the hemorrhage of wealth that is leaving the Black community, much less to start if we don't talk about repairing. They haven't even closed the gap.
Unless white people develop a conscience, then Black people are doomed, is basically what you're saying. And I want to be very clear, and I thank you, Lethal, for clarifying and drawing the point around etymology. But again, your statement actually undergirds my argument, which is that if we have to depend on our enemy to make us whole, then we are up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. It doesn't serve our enemy's best interest to make us whole, right? So our enemy, if we hold our breaths, waiting for our enemy to make us whole and make all the arguments, the wonderful arguments Jice is making, make all the arguments that Theo is making, we can make those arguments, and we have brilliant minds to make those arguments, and there's nothing wrong, essentially, fundamentally, with those arguments. What I'm saying is missing is that, to Lethal's point, if we are at war, the point, if we are at war, and we are, then your enemy is not going to develop a sense of morality or consciousness all of a sudden and say, you know what, that was kind of foul what I did to you. Why don't you go ahead and bankrupt the only thing that I feel like I have, which is this country at this point, and to make you whole again? That's the first point. The second point I'll make very quickly. That's the point that I'm making when I say this is a slippery slope. To say that we can only be made whole by something outside of ourselves is a very dangerous thing to do as far as creating a locus of control of whether you are whole or not. And I would use Black women as an example. If a Black woman is in an abusive relationship and she gets out of that abusive relationship, or she's considering getting out of that abusive relationship, and you go and tell her sister the only way you're going to be made whole is if that man comes and apologizes to you, and that man gives you so much amount of money for the years that you wasted, and this, if you wait on, if he was of the mindset to put you there in the first place, he's not going to be in the mindset to repair it. And if you think that white folk, I would ask you to go and look at a book called The Psychopathic Personality. If you think a psychopath is about to repair and all of a sudden become, and I don't care what you put to his head, a gun, he would rather die. They would rather for America not exist at all than to do right by America in the famous words of The Color Purple.
I get that. And I really get that. I understand that it's not about, I don't think that it's about appealing to their consciousness. Like, I don't think that's really what it's about, right? I think that there has to be strategic ways to infiltrate on a policy level that allow for the policies to go. But in your abuse, the reason why the abuse paradigm or the abuse parallel doesn't actually work is because when a woman leaves that abusive man, right, then she is essentially free from him. Now she can mentally try and tie herself to him getting his shit together in order for her to move on in life. But ultimately she is then free to move on, explore a better, healthier relationship with someone else, go get her own job, go get her own house, go get her whatever. What is happening still in this country is that we are not free to do that, right?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
No, we're not.
Wait, in our chat, and I love it. Our chat is going wild, and I love it. Monty Q had a great question. He said, "Do we need to come up with an exit strategy? What are we talking about that?" And we've talked about that.
Like I said, yes, we are. We are free to go.
I have an exit strategy.
You just said we're not free. We're not free to leave. Like that woman is not free to leave.
Because the secondary question that I think has been happening, so we know we have to dig into this exit strategy, right?
Wait, I want to address that real quick. We're not free to leave. Yes, people can leave, but there's a whole lot that goes into what it looks like to leave, right? Like, this ain't people getting on a horse and buggy or walking across the whole country, right? Like, if you want to go into the rural South, or if you want to go into Boston for that matter, like, I think you'd be hard pressed to find people who could actually afford to physically leave the country. But on top of that,
abused women have that same dynamic.
I understand, but there's also
that's why they stay.
But there's resource. I agree with that, and there's resources that help them. But also, I think that we have to acknowledge what happens once you leave the country that you're from, because in order for you to gain rights in another country, there's a citizenship aspect. So even if you denounce American citizenship, right, like, what does it look like? And I think that right there, again, with propaganda, what it looks like, how we demonize immigrants that come here and get citizenship, and the process, and how messed up it is to get or gain citizenship here. We don't understand that process enough, that America makes it seem like this is the land of opportunity for all, and that we should be lucky that we're here, that we don't even have enough knowledge or information about countries that we could or should go to that could potentially be safe places for us to go and build and thrive. But to that aspect, also, colonialism has affected the entire globe. So, like, naming countries that are actually in a space to allow for Black people to thrive is an interesting dynamic in and of itself.
May I say something real quick, please?
Oh, yeah. No. I want to let Theo hit first, because I know
Theo. Yeah, I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead, brother.
Go ahead, Theo.
So, in contemplating your question, so power concedes nothing without a demand. period. And Black people's demands with enough power actually do get a little bit of leverage. We just asking for the wrong shit. You see what I'm saying? Every bit of justice socially was just reparations light. It was reparations with half the calories. It was reparations in symbolism because they'd rather give it in symbolism than substance, right? And so a critical mass movement is one of the things that needs to develop. What happens after that is whatever bridge we have to cross when we get there. But right now, we got to develop that critical mass. We got to get that snowball rolling. We got to really start talking about that, because acting like somebody owe you something, it can be toxic. But acting like somebody don't owe you something when your children are starving is even worse. You see what I'm saying? And so perhaps it will come to the point that if we can build mass momentum around that, in America, like you say, ain't going to pay a motherfucking thing, then we figure out this exit strategy if we need to. And we figure out how to make ourselves whole. We figure out how to rebuild what we need to do and create a global network if we need to get the fuck out of here. But the fact is, our children's hungry mouths demand an answer. And they demand that we start talking.
Theo. So has there been any community that Black people have created self-sufficiency in where reparations was at the forefront or a major issue for them? Tulsa, Rosewood, right? So you said the hungry children thing. Was that the focus of Black people that were about the business of being self-sustaining?
Well, no, it wasn't. But they got burned down too. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But not only did they get burned down, they weren't prohibited initially from building them, right? Like, I don't think white folks knew what Black Wall Street was going to be. So when Black Wall Street happened, if you recall, Black Wall Street was the land that they were trying to get rid of. They were like, look at this piece of shit land. Let me offload it to you little niggers. That's what they were doing, right? So here y'all go. And then they had no idea that Black folks were going to turn it into what they turned it into. And then that's why it got burned down.
No,
but they were free to build it while they were building it.
White people, listen, this is the thing. White people know who we are. They wouldn't have went and got us in Africa if they didn't know who we are.
Some white people know who we are, because remember, white people suffer from the same level of propaganda that we have, right? So that's where it gets multi-layered, because now we're talking about class and caste systems, right? All white people don't know who we are. Some white people know who we are. Right. Some white people think that we're truly inferior. Some white people know that we are superior, and that's why they go after us the way that they go after us. And why they
actually
keep us down.
Yeah, I agree. I hear you.
Go ahead.
Lethal, yeah.
Are we free to leave? No. Because in the earlier podcast, what did we say? That we are the engine that drives this economy. Who the hell gonna let the engine drive in their community to pack the fuck up and get the hell out of Dodge? It ain't gonna happen. We couldn't even take our asses to any other country or into any fucking businesses during COVID.
Wait a minute. I think Lethal just developed a Southern accent all of a sudden, didn't he?
Yeah.
His ancestors came out of that shit.
Do y'all understand what I was saying? We couldn't even go into the grocery stores during COVID. You think them motherfuckers gonna let us up and lead this country when we are the force driving the engine of their fucking economy? The answer to that question is hell to the fuck no.
Look, that's a good point.
Now, over to one of the questions or comments in the from one of our viewers here. Can we go to the UN? Yes, we can go to the UN, because there's something known as the UN Human Rights Council. And on March 19th of 2021, here's what the chief of the Human Rights Council said. Brutality and discrimination against people of African descent continue to occur. And what she said was, there is no fix to police violence against Black people in America without tackling the scourge in that society, which is white racism. So what I'm getting at is this: if we do it right and smartly and follow in the steps of some of our forefathers and ancestors, like Marcus Garvey, like Malcolm X, like Dr. Clark Anderson, Dr. Henry Clark, and all of those brothers, Francis Cress Wesling, all those brothers and sisters, yes, we can begin to establish unique relationships with home countries that have a political and economic interest to this motherfucking country right here. There's a reason why you have a town in Alabama. I'm proud to say some of my family come from there. It's called Africa Town. And that small little town in Alabama has a fucking contract agreement for economic partnership with the entire country of Benin. It can be done. It's just, how do we do it? That's what I want us to start talking about.
Yeah.
How do we do it?
But I think that's a great point, Lethal. I think that's the best point that we've had made on this issue as of yet, because that doesn't say America owes me. What that says is I'm going to go form a relationship with my brothers and sisters on the continent and build this shit, because if I wait on America and this check y'all keep crying about, then we ain't gonna never get it. So I'm gonna go to Benin, I'm gonna go to Togo, I'm going to go to Chad, I'm gonna go to Nigeria, I'm gonna go to Zimbabwe, I'm gonna go to these places and form relationships. And if that's what you're talking about with reparations, I'm with that shit. But that's us repairing us.
Well, remember what I said in the beginning. Remember what I said in the beginning. What I said in the beginning was we also have to look at African the countries.
Yeah, I thought you meant do they owe us? But I understand what you're saying now.
This is why we do 7 generations black, y'all. These are the type of conversations that have got to happen. Before we go into our mindset moment and we end up with season 7, I want to remind you again, this has been powered by the Black Boss Summit. Do me a favor, go grab your tickets. I don't know where you're tuning in from, but it's time for you to fly into the Mile High so you can be a part of this A-list experience, $249 in person. It is a weekend filled of tangible events that you want to be a part of. Come and increase your network and your net worth and be a part of the Black Boss Summit 2021, where we talk about how we adapt, perform, and thrive because we are a resilient people. Grab your tickets now, www.blackbosssummit.com. All right, my panel, I'm going to leave you with this as we start to develop our last little piece of our mindset moment. We think about this in a 7 generational lens, why we have these type of conversations on CTN Media. So again, those of you that are tuning in for the first, second, or third time, make sure you're tapped in on YouTube to CTN Media. Ring that bell so you can be notified by our next upcoming content. You never know what will be coming your way. I want to wrap this in a bow for everybody. Is there a path forward on getting these industries or government to pay up? And is this the best place to put our energy? I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to start this out with H-Soul. If you can start us out in this space, and then we're going to go around the map.
Yeah, thank you. I love what Lethal's point is in bringing that as an example. That's the mindset that we really got to be about. And I love that he gave that, and I love to see his ancestors come out in his description of that. With that being said, there's someone in the chat room named Mad Capper, right? That's talking about the need for re-education, and he's absolutely, or she is absolutely correct. That's what this issue was really about, is mindset. Right. And I know that in the success sciences, when walking around thinking that people owe you or that life owes you or something owes you, it doesn't allow you. It creates a block for your own moving forward and you thinking that you have it within your power right now to make yourself whole. So I love the nuanced conversation. I think this is a conversation that we have to be very weary of. It reminds me of Dave Chappelle's skit at one point where he talked about Black folks finally getting their reparations, and then cats is driving around in Newport trucks and they buying all right. Like, the mindset has to be shifted for us, and we have to be. And so I agree with Mad Capper that is fundamental to even having a discussion around, do we want to create a national movement when have we laid the groundwork to what the mindset of our people would be, and hoping for that.
I love that. Thank you for that, H. So, my guy, Theo, is there a path forward in getting these industries to really pay, or the government to pay up? And is this a space we should be putting our energy in?
There is. And the strategy is, number 1, build critical mass. Number 2, create the infrastructure that holds the reparations when they get here. So, in fact, you're dealing with the Claude Anderson / Boyce Watkins approach, where you have the possibility of, let's use our resources to try to repair ourselves, to re-educate our folks about financial literacy, to figure out how to build some infrastructure, to figure out how to create relationships across the waters with the brothers and sisters on the continent, so that We dig our trenches for when the rain comes. You see what I'm saying? And if that doesn't work, then we figure out how to make our own rain. I am not a fan of waiting for psychos to change their fucking minds. That is true, right? But what I am a fan of is at least not relating to psychos like they're not. You see what I'm saying? Like, don't relate to this fucking system as if it doesn't owe you. Like, don't relate to it as if there's not a debt, because that is enabling them to extract more. And so at that point, and then at the same time, that's the left hand. The right hand creates your own infrastructure and do what the fuck you've got to do. You know what I'm saying? And this isn't a way to personally jab at white people, by the way, even though you're very friendly to me and you've given me lots of opportunities and we're totally cool. You fucking owe me, white boy. That's not what I'm saying, right? That's not productive at any sense. But with our people, dig your trenches for when the water comes, create infrastructure so that if reparations do come, we can fuel that shit and grow off that shit.
Thank you, Theo E.J. Wilson. Very solid point. My girl, Jice Johnson, holding it down for the women. Let us know, is there a path forward in getting these industries or government to pay up? And is this where we should be putting our energy?
I do think that there is a path forward. I think it's going to be a lot more complicated than what we think, but I think that the path forward is going to rely on policy. And that's why I think we keep having this continuous conversation around breaking away from the Democratic Party, because I don't see the future in the Democratic Party. And nor do I see the future in the Republican Party. So let's be clear. And I think part of that problem is that we always a lot of us see things as an or instead of an and, right? So we need to start talking about and. I think we absolutely need to be putting energy into collectively pushing for policy that repairs us and restores us. And then also, I think we need to be actively building in other countries, right? In other places across the diaspora to absolutely include the motherland, probably start with the motherland. So when I'm looking from a 7-generational lens, I think it's the question of, it's not the question of, it is the strategy of, and we need to do both. And I think in that we need to recognize that we have quite a bit of a fight ahead of us. And so, I think we feel like our energy can't be split, but I think it has to be. That's the place that we are in history, is that our energy still has to be split.
Ooh, sad truth, but truth. Thank you, Jice, for that. My brother who kicked off this conversation, I need you to look at this from a 7-generational lens and give our people to sit with. Is there a path forward for really getting the industries and government to pay up? And is this a place for us to really put our energy?
It's always the right thing to do to make people, make institutions, make amends for their wrongdoings against you. It shows that you value yourself. So it's always the right thing to do to that part of the question, right?
Yeah.
Is it doable? Is there a path? Yes, there is. Unfortunately, none of us here right now will be alive when it occurs. And so what we have to do now is plant that seed. What we have to do now is, I guess, following along the concept of that movie, Inception. You understand what I'm saying? We plant the seed, you dig, into the generations that are coming behind us so that they can continue to work. It goes back to something Soul said before on an earlier podcast. Pharaoh started the building of a pyramid, but he never saw it. You understand what I'm saying? And that's the mindset we need to have. And that is why the first most critical step is the educational piece that Mad Kappa talks about. The education is very important. You understand what I'm saying? And so I'm going to just close out with the wisdoms of our ancestors again, right?
Okay.
It is from a small seed that the giant Iroko tree has its origins. Why is this important? Because knowledge is like a garden. If it is not cultivated, it cannot be harvested.
There you have it, people. That is a 7 generations breakdown on reparations and who owes us. This conversation may continue in season 8. You never know where we're going, but you can continue it right in our chat. We want to hear from you, and we want to see you at theblackbosssummit.com as well. Thank you for tuning in again to 7 Generations Black. We are going to take a 2-week break, but that doesn't mean you can't catch up on the conversation. Check us out from season 1 to 6 and let us know what you want to hear about next. We also might be doing some pop-ups where we invite you into the conversation for a pop-up. And don't forget, tomorrow, we have a special debut tomorrow on the critical race theory brought to us by Theo and LETHOL for Shop Talk Live, featured right here on CTN Media. So tune in tomorrow. I believe that's 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. 6 p.m.
We're going to be debating directly, dialoguing with conservatives, Black conservatives, about critical race theory live. So y'all need to tune into that. It's going to be a Cleo Parker Robinson sponsored by Shop Talk Live. Let's go.
You want to tune into that because the conversation is going to get heated, but absolutely necessary. Do me a favor, still drop this off in somebody's DM because they need to know about 7 Generations Black and the conversations that are really important that are happening. Let's make sure we're not just doing entertainment, but we're doing edutainment. Let's educate, let's entertain, and let's come together. Keep on hustling. Peace and love. Until next time, hustle for your 7 Generations Black. We love you. Peace, family.